Hey guys, and welcome back to Devil Dagger here in Gnomoria. Again, we're dealing with the loss of my voice track, but in between episodes, I went ahead and set up some of the flooring for our carpenter's area, just to give our kingdom a little bit more value, trying to influence the influx of some gnomes, just to get them basically to think our colony or kingdom is worth visiting and settling down in. Tried to keep it a pretty uniform color. Like I said, the pathways were stone because that's where everybody would be walking. Taking a look at some of our stocks, we're running a little bit low on stone, but 55 isn't a bad number. It's when you're doing major projects, that would probably be a really bad area. I'm trying to decide in this section where I want my masonry or miners to be focused in their efforts. The most effective placement would be next to the mine. That way they can just go down there, grab some raw stone, bring it back up. Obviously, when it's being mined, people will bring it up to the respective stockpile that it's supposed to be in. But just in case they run out, it would be nice if they could go down there themselves. I thought about it, and I would really like to convert the community dormitory into a hospital, but it's really not worth it in my opinion, because we only have 5,481 kingdom worth right now. And so we're not getting very large forces raiding us, so it's very unlikely that we're going to be suffering many damages. I hope I don't jinx myself by saying that, but in my opinion, it's better to have a place for all our gnomes to sleep. But it might be worth looking into actually creating some bedrooms for our gnomes, which is something to think about for the near future anyway, because a bedroom actually allows your gnomes to be more productive because they spend less time sleeping when they have their own private bedroom. Work on the carpentry area is a little bit slow, but that's mainly because we don't have enough trees for the most part, and the labor force is still just the general laborers and suppliers that we had in the previous episodes, where nobody is specialized in their talent, so it takes a little bit longer to get everything done. But as you can see, we have quite a few lizard bones and lizard skulls. We have a few goblin skulls, because apparently goblins, for whatever reason, don't have bones. They're just flesh sacks with a skull. So you can't create anything out of them except for a skull helmet from their bones, but you can use them for meat. And if you're trying to generate some worth or some trade goods, bone statuettes are a pretty decent source of value. And like I said in the previous episode, I do like to have stockpiles nearby to my workshops that allow our gnomes basically just to move things. We have our we have our carpenter's stockpile nearby. Eventually we'll have a stockpile for the sawmill as well, where it can just pull logs and not have to worry about going all the way out to the grove. Although it's not that far of a distance, but it speeds everything up, and if they only have to travel 2 tiles versus having to travel, 15 to 20, well then that just makes everything so much faster and a lot easier to build. As you can see, we are placing the final plank, and the reason that there are no planks underneath the workshop, I'm not sure if you could tell, which I go through right here, is because if you put flooring in underneath a workshop, it will actually freeze up the workshop if you have the center tile. As I'm demonstrating, if the center tile is in need of replacing, it actually will not do any more work there. and I'm not sure if that's intended by the developer, but it's affected every version of the game that I've ever played. Every time I've tried to replace a workshop tile, if the center tile of the workshop was affected, it would just not do anything. It would stay there, which actually kind of freezes everything up when you're wanting wood underneath the sawmill, because the sawmill is in charge of generating that wood. So it's a little bit of a problem. It's kind of a catch-22. So eventually canceled the job to allow the sawmill to... sorry for the cut there. That there was a problem in the recording where I had my dogs barking, and that's why there was a cut right there. Nothing major happened. I was just trying to get, I think, maybe 2, maybe 3 tiles were replaced, so you didn't miss anything. But like I was saying, eventually I canceled the job underneath the sawmill for the center tile to allow one of the laborers to go and actually replace that floor tile. But things are, I really like the way that the carpentry area is coming along. Like I said, the masonry workshop is next. I'll get that set up, and we'll have our 2 cornerstone, if you will, of industry, which is wood and stone. And after that, I think I will try and set up the military by setting up the blacksmith area. And here I'm just taking a look, trying to find a way of improving the squads a little bit. Decided to actually add a few more people. Things are moving. Right now they're moving kind of slow, but that's only because, well, you can't really do anything until you get some nomads. And that's, yes, we've gotten a few, but it's not nearly enough to actually specialize in anything that could actually speed everything up. Because once you start, see, look at all the pine plank jobs that the sawmill's trying to generate, and unfortunately, because it has that center tile. And the reason why I knew that it was going to do that, but I tried to see if this version of the game actually improved that at all, but apparently it didn't. So I decided that it's probably a good idea to cut down some pine trees since we don't have any. So that's what one of our laborers is going out there to do, which I don't know if you noticed, but he actually has a pickaxe and a hand axe. So he is equipped to do all the jobs of a laborer, basically. And we get 3 more nomads, which is really nice because it ends up getting us over the 15 gnome mark. And the reason why that's nice is because I actually abandoned the prospect of waiting till we have 20 gnomes to set everything up. I just go ahead and decide that I'm going to set up the specialized professions just so I can get the fort moving a little bit faster. It's going to generate more value, so we'll probably be seeing some bigger attacks in the near future, but I think it's well worth it because it'll actually, we can start expanding a little bit. And there's going to be a cut in here very soon, and that's what that cut is in between the video that you'll see is me setting up all the professions for the gnomes. And we come back, and a whole bunch of gnomes were thirsty. Apparently they were training, but I went ahead and set up all of the specialized professions and assigned all the gnomes to their profession that would be best suited for them based on their skill set. Looks like there was a bear up there on that mountain that our gnomes ran away from, but I'll go ahead and explain the professions so that it makes a little bit more sense. every profession has caretaking and construction and hauling, but the miners have mining, masonry, prospecting, and the regular things. The job type priority plays a heavy part in Gnomoria, so pay attention to that when you're setting up your jobs if you do decide to play the game. Masonry, the only difference between a mason and a miner is the mason can do stone carving and pottery, and he doesn't do any prospecting. The next job is a lumberjack, and obviously he focuses more on wood cutting and carpentry, and he helps out a little bit with horticulture because that obviously belongs to the grove. The carpenter has wood carving attached to his, which is the only difference between a carpenter and a lumberjack. The blacksmith is a little weird for some people. He only focuses on smelting and blacksmithing. I don't allow him to do any metalworking, weapon crafting, or armor crafting, and that's just personal preference, really. The arms dealer does everything a blacksmith does, plus weapon crafting and armor crafting. The crafts gnome does all the craft-related tasks: metalworking, gem cutting, jewelry making, if I'm not mistaken, bone carving, and that's about it. The regular things, that's just, he basically focuses on adding trade goods and value to the colony. Tailor does weaving, tailoring, animal husbandry because of the alpacas that provide wool, and he helps out with farming when he has nothing else to do. The animal handler focuses on leatherworking and working with the animals. He does the butchery, the animal husbandry, feeding the animals, and helps out on the farms when he's not taking those tasks. The farmers actually help feed the animals as well, but they focus on the groves and farming. That's a pretty general job that I like to keep. The chef, he does some butchery and helps out in the groves and the farms when he's not preparing meals for all of the colony. The barkeep is basically the same thing as a chef, but instead of cooking, he'll just be brewing. So he helps out in the groves and the fields whenever he's not busy. Da Vinci, I named it that simply because of Leonardo da Vinci. He was a great engineer. He does tinkering, machining, and engineering. He doesn't do mechanic, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in the next job. The doctor strictly focuses on medic and caretaking and construction and hauling. His sole purpose in life is to take care of the gnomes and make sure they're healthy. Now, our soldiers actually are the mechanics, and that's because when a trap is set off in this game, it has to be reset. They also have horticulture and farming, so that when they're not training, they're not sleeping, or they're not eating, they are actually helping in the fields and the groves, and that's because helping in the fields and the groves actually raises the nimbleness stats of a gnome, and it makes them faster, and that can help with dodging against enemies. So it's a good idea to set your soldiers up with some kind of training that improves their stats, whether it be mining, which raises their strength or their hit power. And right here is just a shot of what all of the gnomes are going to be doing in their respective jobs. We don't have every job set up. We don't have someone doing every single job, and that's because we don't have somebody that's good for everything. I believe we don't have a barkeep, and that was because nobody was good at brewing except our chef. And a chef is more important than a barkeep because we have an unlimited supply of drink with the well. Here we're just changing the names of the squads because I decided that we needed something a little bit, I don't know, I guess because we are actually getting our first soldiers, we needed a better name for them. And we end up going with the Blue Slaughterers, which I thought was pretty funny. Eventually, when we have our official military set up, we'll also change the names. This is more just to give our gnomes a sense of pride. And we do a little bit of rearranging to take some of our specialists, like our chef and our animal handler, out of the squads, and that's because I would much rather lose a farmer than lose a chef. A chef provides the food for your gnomes, and the better the food, the less they have to actually go back for another piece of food later. Like, if they eat a sandwich, it's much better than just eating a piece of fruit or eating a piece of bread. So, like I said, I would much rather lose a farmer rather than losing a blacksmith or a doctor or something like that. We're still sticking with the early times formation, which is basically just gnomes kicking, biting, scratching, punching everything they can, and focusing on dodging attacks. Similar to, I guess you could say, monks that train in the martial arts. We're trying to move some of the gnomes around. Obviously, we don't want a lumberjack in the formation if we can help it. So I believe here we actually run into a problem where I can't find some of the gnomes that I was actually looking for, and I believe it was just because we only have 5 farmers, and for some reason or another, like, I could not find that 5th farmer. I knew we had 4 farmers in the other squad, so I just kept looking, and eventually I found it, but it was really aggravating trying to find that 5th farmer. One thing I wish this game had was an ability to actually search for the name of a gnome, or go to a specific gnome and add it to a squad from the gnome screen rather than having to do it through the military screen. It's a little bit frustrating. But the trees are finally being cut down, which means that the carpentry area will get the last bits set up. And then after we had the last planks set up, we're going to set up the stockpiles for the carpentry area, and we're also going to dig out the area for our miners. And here I'm just trying to measure how I want the area to actually look. That's why I pause the game when I'm trying to do layouts of a specific section of the fort, is just to give me enough time, because I don't want my gnomes to come in and dig it when I'm not sure of how I want it to look. The problem that I come across is in this game you pretty much have to choose whether or not you want a room to be even or odd. If it has an even number of tiles for an opening, it's going to be set up to where each side will be more symmetrical. And if you do it with odd, it's going to be where the middle section of the room will need to be symmetrical on both sides, but there will be a line down the middle that will be basically just the middle of the room, and you can't focus on it anymore. And that's what I was arguing with myself with the design of this room, and I end up going with an odd number of tiles rather than an even for the doorway. So it took me a little while to decide how I wanted the entryway to be, but you'll see that I start spacing everything out and I try to get everything looking rather nice. I'm a big stickler for that. I think it adds a bigger dimension to the game. I mean, yeah, I could have just kept it very simple. I could have just thrown down a square or rectangle and had everything go perfectly fine. But it makes things a little, I don't know, just in my opinion, it makes it boring. You don't get as much from the game. And here I'm taking everything that I laid out and I'm moving it back against that far wall, and that's just to give me enough space in case I need it to expand the stockpiles for the respective stone that the stone cutters are going to be using. Because it does actually need a decent amount of room for the stone. Yes, each pile of stone can hold 64, but that's not nearly enough. Once you get down to the lower levels and you start actually massively clearing levels for bits of ore, whether it be copper, tin, malachite, iron, gold, silver, platinum, things like that. And as you can see, it still hasn't set up any of the planks here, and that's because the sawmill can't do anything, and it's rather annoying. Adjusting the priorities of the workshops, because I completely forgot that I needed to do that when I set up the workshops. But eventually I catch on to the fact that I need to set up the workshops by removing that center tile, and then everything will start going. I was just checking to see where my carpenter was, and eventually I catch on to the fact that, hey, that center tile still hasn't been done, therefore the gnome cannot do any work in that workshop. So I go ahead and clear all of it, because I'm a derp. And as soon as I clear all those jobs, the gnome comes back to work, and things go smoothly. Cleared out the room for the masonry area. In between episodes, I do actually set up the masonry area, and that's just so y'all don't have to suffer through my indecision as a gamer. But that's going to do it for this episode of Gnomoria here in Devil Dagger. Y'all have a great one.